presentation of our new report, The Future of Natural Gas in a Low-Carbon World, which marks the culmination of some 24 months of research, analysis, and convenings, which took place in 2 phases beginning in November 2020. Along the way, the world was rocked by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, leading to a deeper understanding globally of the importance of energy access and energy security. Now, we have a series of distinguished guests here in a packed program, so I'll just briefly touch on some logistical details. In addition to our attendees here on Capitol Hill, we have a virtual audience, which it will be worldwide. The report is available on the EFIF website, which is efifoundation.org, and there's a link to it on Zoom, or will be. And the event is being recorded and will be also accessible on our website later today. And of course, you have fact sheets with key takeaways available for all the audience who are joining us here. For those of you who don't know about the EFI Foundation, we are a nonprofit that has become a leader in data-driven analysis and actionable policy recommendations for the clean energy transition. Through our analysis, we chart the transition's intersection with energy security, social equity, and innovation. EFI was founded in 2017 by 3 people in this room: Joe Heiser, who was the former chief financial officer at DOE and plays a key financial and analytical role at our organization. Melanie Kenderdine was the director of the Office of Energy Policy and Systems Analysis at DOE. She was the project leader on the global gas study and will present findings today. Both of them and me have worked for EFI's founder, Ernest J. Moniz. Now, few people in this room or virtually, or indeed in the city, require a detailed biography of him, but we all know, I think, that he served as U.S. Secretary of Energy from 2013 to 2017, was a key architect of the Paris Agreement, and worked with then Secretary of State John Kerry on the Iran nuclear agreement. So it's my pleasure to turn over to EFI Foundation's founder and CEO to offer opening remarks and guide us through the program.
Well, thank you, David, and thanks to my fellow principals and everyone else who came here so early in the morning. Today, as David said, we'll be presenting the salient points, recommendations from this study on the future of natural gas in a low-carbon world. The study, as you'll be hearing, examines the role of natural gas in addressing what is sometimes referred to as the energy trilemma: energy security, energy equity, and environmental sustainability, the last of which obviously includes decarbonization as a major thrust. It also provides specific recommendations for decision makers in the United States and elsewhere to address the role of natural gas in a low-carbon world. I think it's fair to say that just about everyone, both domestically and internationally, values all 3 objectives, but we also should acknowledge that the priority ordering of those is not the same in different parts of the world. Certainly in the developing world, economic development, which is an aspect of social equity, rises probably to the top of that list in most places. In major parts of Asia, energy security arguably is perhaps first on the list right now in particular. In the industrialized world in Europe, despite their obvious energy security concerns of the last couple of years in particular, decarbonization is kind of the lead priority. And so I think the whole issue around the discussion of natural gas and the way we certainly think about this is we need all 3 objectives to be on the table, and really the question is, the balancing of those priorities, and how natural gas, in fact, is core to that discussion about the balancing of all three priorities. What we like to say is that, unfortunately, too often the discussion around those three priorities tends to devolve into stovepipes, as opposed to recognizing that progress on all of them requires treating it as one conversation. And personally, I have to say that I thought COP28, to now revive a distant event all of 6 months ago or whatever, even less than that, 5 months ago, I thought was notable in the string of COP discussions by its pragmatism, by recognizing that energy security, the global south, had to be at the table alongside decarbonization for those discussions. Obviously, it goes without saying that Russia's invasion of Ukraine certainly put energy security on the map, and natural gas specifically as the driver of the energy security concerns that resulted. But again, recognizing that in that discussion, we cannot diminish the role of decarbonization as absolutely critical and a long-term commitment. We all know that certainly in the United States and in some other places, the last decade, a decade plus, has seen the substitution of gas for coal as being one of the principal decarbonization directions. But we also know, and the report will discuss the challenges that natural gas faces right now. It's carbon light, but still there is still the word carbon there, and of course, just in the last week, we've seen at least the first shoe to drop in terms of EPA rulings in terms of power plant emissions. There's still a second shoe to drop, which is important for our discussion. LNG transport costs, providing rather different prices for gas around the world, is an issue. The need for substantial distribution infrastructure can be a challenge in many parts of the world. On the LNG side, when I left the secretary position just over 7 years ago, the LNG exports from the lower 48 had just begun in 2016, and we all felt quite confident that the ceiling for LNG exports was maybe something like 15 BCF per day. Well, we're approaching that now, and of course the approved projects. Well, the approved projects being built roughly will double that in no time, and the approved projects would be taking us closer to the 50 BCF per day complete. I mean, the scale of this change, I think, has not been fully appreciated. Of course, we also have, in the LNG side, the dynamics around the pause in licensing LNG exports, and won't go into great detail on that. The report does, of course, talk about that, but I would just say that here, for example, the industry probably can do a lot more in terms of having the pause be a pause by taking care of some of the homework that needs to be done, for example, in terms of life cycle emissions, as an example. This question of emissions, life cycle emissions, very important, especially methane. And the United States, this is a global report, but the United States is certainly among those that we would say are well positioned to lower the supply chain greenhouse gas emissions with our strong programs in emissions reduction technologies like CCUS, methane abatement, hydrogen perhaps as a scalable enterprise. But the report certainly emphasizes that while there's a lot that we can do here domestically, and we play a central role in terms of supplying other parts of the world with this enormous growth in and projected growth in LNG exports, the reality is we have to work together, especially with allies and friends, to have natural gas play the role that COP28 talked about as a critical transition fuel, again reflecting, I think, the pragmatism of COP28. So I want to thank the EFIF team. I want to thank also a number of external experts who helped structure the study through white papers, through participation in a number of regional workshops. And with that, I'm going to turn to my colleague and leader of the study team, Melanie Kenderdine, to provide an overview of the report. So, thank you.
Thank you. Slides coming up. Here we go. I have the toughest job of the day. I have to summarize a 250-page report in 25 minutes. That's 10 minutes, 10 pages a minute, okay? So I'm going to be talking really fast. And fortunately for me, Secretary Moniz already stole half of my lines, okay? So I can go through those even quicker. And 20 minutes. Why 20? No. At any rate, this is Global Gas Phase 2. We did Global Gas Phase 1, and in that one, we, in 8 regions of the world, we engaged think tanks, major think tanks in those regions to pull together experts and pull together the different views around the world of experts, et cetera, in different regions of the world. From that, we decided to do Global Gas Phase 2, which it is a global study, but it is also does a deep dive focus on Asia and Europe based on the results from the first study that we did. And because the U.S. is such a large supplier of Asia and Europe vis-a-vis LNG, we're doing a lot of work on the U.S. as well. We had looked at regions within Asia, sub-regions, Northeast Asia and China, that's China, Japan, South Korea, Southeast Asia and South Asia, all very different. And we did Europe. We had a workshop in Singapore for Asia. In Europe, we had to have a workshop in Eastern Europe and Western Europe. The views are very, very different in Eastern and Western Europe about the role of natural gas. And so we had workshops in Sofia and Brussels. This is where the Secretary did steal my line. He mentioned the energy trilemma, energy security, and that's the ability to meet energy demand. You can see the subcategories there. Energy equity, the ability to provide affordable energy for domestic and commercial use, and then environmental sustainability, and that includes decarbonization, methane abatement, the net zero pledges, and air pollution. We tend to forget that, very important in environmental sustainability. And then there are a lot of cross-cutting issues, and the analysis looks at those cross-cutting issues. The EU price cap, for example, the hydrogen strategies around the world, the CBAM in Europe, et cetera, et cetera. So those informed the deeper dives that we did and the crosscuts. The European workshops, these are some key themes and findings. I'm not going to read all of them, but the views, as I just said, the views on natural gas were very, very different in Eastern and Western Europe. Western European countries plan to use low to zero carbon hydrogen to meet industrial demand. Eastern European participants viewed natural gas as a critical transition fuel, And then concerns were raised about policies such as the CBAM and Repower EU, that it could weaken European industrial competitiveness. There was a lot of discussion of that at both workshops in Europe. Asian workshop report, the key findings: natural gas demand in Asia is expected to be, and I'll discuss this more in a minute, main driver for global LNG markets in the coming decades. You'll see that in the numbers we come up with. Affordable and reliable energy supply is a top concern for many Asian countries. It's critical to elevate the voices of the low to middle income countries in Asia in the net zero context. Coal to gas fuel switching, as the Secretary mentioned, lowers air pollution and decreases carbon emissions. Large-scale deployment of carbon capture is critical for natural gas to be utilized while meeting decarbonization goals. So that was what came out of the Asian workshop. And we had our first workshop here in the U.S. on this study 3-4 days after Russia invaded Ukraine. We had to totally change the focus, okay? And that obviously elevated energy security to a very high level in the discussion. And these are the numbers, and it just shows you why we had to do a deep dive into the U.S. as well. This is the year-on-year change in gas imports. Europe lost 22 BCM from Russia. Norway up 2 BCM, others down 1 BCM. The United States provided Europe with 19 out of 22 BCM after the Russian invasion. That is the importance of U.S. natural gas and our LNG exports to our allies and trading partners. It's kind of a stunning number, I think, and that's what it raises the energy security issue. We did have that workshop right after the invasion, and we were sending, let's get all of our natural gas to Europe. My friends in Asia were calling me up saying, what about us? What about us? We need gas too. And and this is the impact of those high spot LNG prices across Asia, okay, when that happened in that year. Pakistan, they had rolling blackouts up to 12 hours. Bangladesh, mandatory conservation measures. India, reduced gas use in refining and chemicals, mostly replaced with oil. Lucky they could replace it with oil, could be coal. Okay, China, power sector use was down by 9%, natural gas. Japan accelerated the restart of 7 nuclear reactors. I'd say that's a good outcome, actually, for the climate. Korea put voluntary coal restrictions suspended for the summer of 2022, so they were burning coal. We all know about Germany doing that as well. And Thailand, diesel generation was up 16-fold. So this is the impact of those high prices. Natural gas to Europe had this impact on Asia. And these are, this is the wrong slide. It's the orders are out wrong, but I'll say more in a minute. This is LNG import infrastructure in operation and under construction demand forecasts, Europe and Northeast Asia. I want to show you what those are. So operating capacity and under construction, 206 metric tons per annum in Europe. Demand in 2050 is only 77 metric tons per annum, 77.7. Okay, so there's a lot of building going on of LNG import infrastructure. Forecast for demand is down, and this is WoodMac forecast. And I'll show you the slide that's missing is a range of forecast. WoodMac's kind of in the middle. And so we have used WoodMac for a lot of what you're seeing here. You see the same thing in China and Northeast Asia. Operating and capacity and under construction LNG, 534 metric tons per annum, and demand in 2050, 187.7. It is that's 2.65 times the capacity being built as demand forecast for 2050, and in China and Northeast Asia, 2.85 times. It is the exact opposite in Southeast Asia and South Asia. 66.8 operating capacity and under construction, and demand in 2050, 143.2. And South Asia, same thing, 98.2 operating under construction, and demand of 187.7. So big differences in the regions, and I'm not sure what can be done to address the potential for stranded assets and the need for more assets. There's a lot of things that we recommend in the analysis. You see the numbers there for Southeast Asia and South Asia. Now, this is natural gas power generation plants announced and under construction and operating in Europe. The numbers are pretty staggering. Construction and operating, that's 374,000 megawatts operating and under construction in Europe. And you can see United Kingdom, look at Turkey is huge, Italy as well. So you can see Germany building a lot of natural gas power generation. They're going to need natural gas in the future. Their policies don't necessarily comport with that. It could mean stranded assets, actually. You see the same numbers for gas pipelines, transmission pipelines as well. Huge build out of pipelines in both Asia and Europe. And these are the numbers for Asia. Look at China alone has 120,000 megawatts of operating and 48,000 under construction. And so the operating and under construction there is 510,000 megawatts. And so those plants have lifespans 30, 40 years at least. And so there's going to be either they're going to need a lot of gas or they're going to strand those assets. So that's an important point. Secretary mentioned the pause and the numbers. He's already given them. Existing export volumes, 14.4 BCF a day. Approved export volumes, 31.97 BCF a day. If all the approved, and so the approved are not affected by the pause, it'll increase export capacity by, it'll double export capacity or more than that. So this is switching to, that was all the energy security. This is switching to energy equity. And these numbers, I don't think people pay enough attention to them. The red in these is your total system LCOE or LCOS. Okay, that's dollars per megawatt hour 2020. The green is the levelized capital cost, and the blue is a capacity factor. So you see there for your combined cycles entering service in 2027, 39.94 is your LCOE, 87% capacity factor. At capital cost $9.36. Okay, and onshore wind slightly more expensive, but capacity factor 41%. And look at the capital cost, much higher. Same thing for solar standalone. It's a little less expensive than natural gas LCOE, so LCOS basis, but its capacity factor is 29%, and capital cost $26. And that does not include the cost of storage. I woke up when I was working on this slide, woke up that morning and front page New York Times, wind and solar are cheaper than coal or gas. Not if you include the cost of storage and if you look at the capacity factors. And so people need to remember that and understand that, and when those numbers get thrown around a lot. So natural gas and energy equity. Natural gas has so equity, it's affordable. Okay, that's a point. Okay, has numerous attributes that could enhance energy equity, provides reliable power generation, backup generation for renewables, air pollution reduction. I'll say a little bit about that in a second. Increased food security. Natural gas is used for fertilizer. Okay, so natural gas very important for food security and the associated economic benefits. And I don't think this gets talked about enough either, and we look at this in the study. This is a share of natural gas in total energy-related emissions, selected air pollutants, including CO2. Natural gas is the purple there. Particulate matter, basically zero. Natural gas, zero particulates, basically zero SO2, a little bit. Nitrogen oxide, you see there, I don't know, what is that, 8%, and carbon dioxide, 20%. So the air pollutant value, go to Delhi, India, okay, and see what air pollutants mean to the population and the health. And there are numbers in the study about the health impacts of these air pollutants, and very important. Now I'm going to switch to environmental sustainability. This is net zero target coverage in June of 2023, comparing 2021, 22, and 23. And what you see there, nations increased 20% in that 2.5-year period. 76% of all countries in the world have net zero targets. States and regions increased 99%, cities 63%. In my view, this is a very important number here. Companies, 123%. This includes investors, okay, in this group of companies. And very important, they have net zero targets that they understand the value of natural gas for deep decarbonization and the air pollution benefits, et cetera, when they're making decisions, and they have their own net zero targets, et cetera. This is the one I mentioned was out of place. These are the total global natural gas demand scenarios, and there is a huge difference. So in 2022, natural gas demand was actually 4159 BCM, and look at the difference in the scenarios for 2050. They range from 919 BCM to 6,695 BCM. That's why investors are confused, okay? And I'll say a little bit more about some of the things we think need to address the confusion and how we can get some firmer information about gas demand and associated emissions. You see here there are two cases for EIA, and it's the high economic growth and their reference case, and you can see the range there, 47 to 6695 BCM. Okay, and so a big range, but also significant natural gas demand in 2050 in the EIA numbers. So IEA, this is the stated policy scenario. They showed natural gas demand as flat in 2050, but still a substantial amount of demand. Wood Mac, I said we were using them, and they show 2536 BCM in 2050. And this is IEA's net zero is only 919 BCM of natural gas, so a substantial reduction. In that net zero scenario for IEA, all of the natural gas is used in the industrial sector. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a second, but it's all for industry. I think the Secretary mentioned the incredible value of coal to gas fuel switching. Very, very important in Asia, where they're using a lot of coal and, quite frankly, a lot of oil for their industrial processes and for power generation. And these are IEA numbers. 4% of total CO2 emissions reductions from the power sector were from coal to gas fuel switching total between 2011 and 2018, and 14% in the U.S. 14% of our emissions reductions were from coal to gas fuel switching. The U.S., it surprised me looking at this, U.S. leads the world in emissions reductions, and 61% of that is from coal to gas fuel switching. And so it's very, very important, could have a large impact on Asia, all those countries with net zero targets. It's approximately 8% of total CO2 emissions in China. And IEA said since 2010, coal to gas fuel switching has saved around 500 million tons of CO2 an effect equivalent to putting an extra 200 million EVs running on zero carbon electricity on the road. So it just shows you the value of coal to gas fuel switching and the importance, I think, in Asia in particular, for accelerating that switching. We hear a lot about methane emissions, and it's a huge issue. This is anthropogenic methane emissions worldwide. 40% are from agriculture. Only 37.4% are from energy systems. Agriculture is much larger worldwide. Gas is 10% of total methane emissions worldwide. Waste is another 71 metric tons, and biomass is almost 10 metric tons. Biomass is almost as large as natural gas, it looks like. No, sorry. It's about a third. It's percentage-wise, it's smaller. But any rate, about 60% of the anthropogenic methane emissions are from agriculture and waste. We recommend there aren't technologies for addressing those. There are technologies for addressing gas systems, and so one of the recommendations is invest in, do innovation in technologies to address where the biggest methane emissions are worldwide. This is US. We use a lot more gas here, so our methane emissions are about 23%, agriculture 35%, services 26%. In ag, since 1990, emissions have increased by 6.5% because of cattle, and emissions in natural gas systems have decreased by 15.7%. So we're working on it. We've got a lot of work to do in the US. I think this is an interesting statistic too. Between 2008 and 2021, methane emissions from oil and gas systems declined by 13.4%. Natural gas consumption in that same time period rose by 38%. So we've got a lot more work to do on methane emissions. I went to Katowice, Poland, COP24, said capture your methane. Okay, it's not going to solve the methane problem. Okay, we need technologies and other, it'll solve it for the industry, but not for the world. And so we need to develop new technologies in that regard. We did a deep dive. We did some case studies for the industrial sector, and we did, I can't remember, we did cement, we did steel, we did ammonia, and one other, I can't remember, and I'll show you in a minute. And, but we wanted to, what can we do to reduce emissions in those sectors? And this is the distribution of process heat, temperatures. What you see there, cement, iron, and steel, you need over 1,100 degrees centigrade. Chemicals need 550 to 1,100 degrees. And the refining, 300 to 550 degrees. You can get 400 degrees from electricity. Okay, so a large percentage of these you can get from electricity, up to 400%, 400 degrees. But you can't get it you can't get the temperatures you need for a lot of your key industrial processes from electricity currently. They're working on technologies to do that, but they're not ready. They're not ready for prime time at all. And here you see very high temperature heat, about 32% of processes. The other one was glass. Limestone for cement production, and technologies for addressing those issues are still in the research or pilot phase. So high heat, high temperature process heat, we do not currently have technologies other than a fuel. And natural gas is very, you want me to shut up? Was that to time? Okay. I'm going to do that to you next time you speak, okay? Very quickly. This is energy consumption by energy source and shares, and the top line is 20 bar on the bar. It's the turquoise is 2019, and the bottom bar is 2050, and it's for food, glass, aluminum, et cetera, et cetera. Food, 55% is natural gas. This does not include electricity. That's the yellow bar. Okay, so in the US, where 39% of our electricity is natural gas, you're adding to that. But 55% of the energy used as a feedstock or for heat, aluminum 52%, 90% for glass. You can see the numbers there. And so I don't think people appreciate the role of natural gas in providing that heat or as a feedstock for our industrial base. And the study, we have added up the value of many of those industries to our economy and jobs, and very important. Even where you can electrify, that's 68%, there's a huge difference. And these are IEA numbers, and these are prices for industry. So the difference between natural gas prices and electricity prices for industry, you can see Germany, 123%. Electricity is much more expensive. Korea, 71%. Turkey, 294%. United Kingdom, 195%. And the US, 86%. So even where you can electrify the processes, it's more expensive. A lot of countries very worried and concerned about their competitiveness, okay, with these higher prices. So it's an issue. I've just got three more slides, sir. And I mentioned we did glass, steel, cement, and ammonia. We did deep dives of those. One common thing in all of them was the need for CCS for the industrial sector in the near to midterm. We don't have the technology options for decarbonizing those other than CCS and efficiency, et cetera, et cetera. And so these are, and I also read a lot that CCS is not ready for prime time. These are CCS projects around the world. Operational is green, under construction red, advanced development, and early development. Operating by type, and I've highlighted in yellow there the ones that are relevant to natural gas. So you've got gas processing, fertilizer production, hydrogen production, methanol, iron and steel, and chemicals. Those are operating, and those are in advanced development. Same thing, processing, hydrogen, fertilizer, power generation, finally, 12 for power generation, in advanced development, chemical production. So there are a lot, we need a lot more clearly, but existing and operating and in development CCS projects around the world. And the increases are amazing. Operating between 2019 and 2022, 58% in just 3 years. Operating and advanced development, 670% in 3 years. So CCS is an important option. It's the only option we have right now for some of the industrial processes that I described, and we need support for it. Finally, these are recommendations. I'm just going to highlight a few of those. Establish a collective action mechanism to develop energy security strategies. We did that after the Arab oil embargoes, we set up IEA. We set up a treaty organization and have collective responses when there are shortages or embargoes on oil. We think we need something like that on natural gas. It's more problematic because of the storage issues are very, very different, but we think that's important. Include an energy security determination as a key component of the public interest determination for approving U.S. LNG export permits. Okay, there's a public interest determination that is made. We worked on this when we started at DOE when Ernie was secretary, and we think we need a specific focus on energy security in exports. Ensure ongoing global leadership of the U.S. You saw how important it is. Maintain destination clauses in our contracts. Establish U.S. information sharing requirements and a convening authority in the U.S. Further analyze the needs and operational implications of announced and under construction natural gas-fired plants in Europe and Asia. We don't know how old the existing plants are, how long they will last, what, were there peakers, et cetera, et cetera. So a much deeper analysis needs to be done of the existing and in advanced development there to understand what the demand for natural gas is going to be in the future. On energy equity, enhance international support for the clean energy transition in developing countries. A lot of funding, Altera funding, support additional funding, expand multilateral development bank financing of methane emissions reduction projects, reestablish a multilateral development bank for CCS trust fund, support developing countries in securing reliable and affordable gas supplies, perform an analysis of the Asia-Pacific region, very different interests in the different regions that I showed you. And we recommend something like my office, when Secretary Moniz was there, we did the quadrennial energy review. We recommend something like that be done for Asia, trying to find the right entity to do it. We looked at ASEAN, there might be another entity, but do something like that so that the different interests and needs are accommodated in the region. Environmental sustainability, build international consensus on greenhouse gas disclosure requirements, assess the potential for methane emissions associated with gas supplies, task the CEQ here with clarifying and routinizing the assessment criteria and guidance for emissions from LNG projects, accelerate the implementation of the global methane pledge, assess and quantify methane emissions from LNG shipping. International shipping is only 3% of emissions, but 3% in net zero world is very important, and they are counted, international shipping emissions are counted in no NDCs. So we need to do something on shipping and the differences in methane emissions from ships are very, very different and based on the type of ship. Incentivize and accelerate R&D to reduce the cost of electrifying industrial heat, and incentivize industry to switch to low-carbon hydrogen. And then finally, there were some cross-cutting issues. Identify an international entity to develop consistent, transparent, and accurate methodologies for calculating Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. This is where I said something earlier. We really, really need accurate, agreed, an entity to do this, because they're all over the map, all over the place, and no consistency whatsoever. And it is 30,000 tons of cement are needed to anchor a 5-megawatt wind turbine. Okay, so those, when it's zero emissions, not when you need 30,000 tons of cement. Establish and maintain accurate and comprehensive methodologies. Same issue, a little more detailed. IEA should accommodate economic development metrics in its modeling. The Secretary mentioned this. Very, very important in the future that the economic development be reflected there. Under the auspice of the UNFCCC, complete a price-based climate policy economic analysis and accelerate international collaboration on deployment of CCUS. So just in time for the senator walking in, and that's all I have. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Well, thank you, Melanie. And while Senator Manchin gets his caffeine, we are going to hear a recorded message from Maroš Šefčovič. Maroš is the, what is he, Senior Vice President or somewhere here it says it, Executive Vice President, excuse me, of the European Commission. And Maroš has been with the European Commission for about 15 years. When I was Energy Secretary, he was the European Commission Energy Secretary. We worked closely together. And I think this is a fitting ramp into Senators Manchin and hopefully Murkowski, because Maroš is also someone who is, as they are, very pragmatic, a word that I use as one of great praise. So let's, could we roll the Maroš Šefčovič greeting?
Second, for natural gas to be successful as a transitional Dear senators, distinguished guests, it is a pleasure to be part of this launch event. I want to thank my friend Ernest Moniz, President and the CEO of the Energy Futures Initiative Foundation, for inviting me to present the European perspective. I want to use this opportunity to convey three main messages. First, that natural gas has a role to play as a transitional fuel, something reflected in the COP28 conclusions. It will help ensure our energy security and energy equity as our economies decarbonize, given its associated emissions are half of those of the coal and third of oil. So with Europe having taken decisive action to reach net zero by 2050, including by accelerating the clean energy transition, we also recognize the importance of natural gas, notably in the medium term. And LNG in particular will continue to represent a significant source of gas for the EU, especially in those countries where infrastructure bottlenecks are limiting pipeline supplies. Given this, I'm delighted with the success of the joint purchase of gas under the EU energy platform. Within a year of its launch, it had attracted short to medium supply offers of 160 billion cubic meters of gas from global producers. And I encourage all gas producers, exporters and traders to take part in the survey we have launched to gauge the interest in the long-term product on the platform of up to 20 years, which runs for another week or so. Second, for natural gas to be successful as a transitional fuel, we need prolonged stability on global markets. Europe has had to tackle its worst ever energy crisis caused by Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine and its subsequent weaponization of energy resources. That we have withstood this challenge was in a large part thanks to the excellent energy partnership between the EU and the US. American LNG made a significant contribution to Europe's security and its ability to bring down energy prices and phase out 100 billion cubic meters of Russian gas imports within a year. But while the situation has now stabilized, we must remain vigilant. And with the US now acting as guarantor of global energy security, thanks to its LNG, any decision that may give the market jitters should be carefully considered. We should work towards strengthening our strategic energy partnership as the European and global economy will continue to need US LNG to grow without coal and Russian energy. Third, for gas to remain a credible transitional fuel, it is vital to accelerate the decarbonization of the energy industry. This includes addressing methane, for which it is responsible for a third of global emissions. Hence the crucial importance of initiatives such as the Global Methane Pledge, launched by European Commission's President von der Leyen and President Biden at COP26 in Glasgow in 2021. With the ambition of slashing global emissions by 30%, as well as the new regulation agreed in the EU to reduce energy sector methane emissions in Europe and in global supply chains, and industry initiatives such as the Oil and Gas Methane Partnership 2.0. To conclude, let me express my deep appreciations for the strategic importance of the EU-US energy partnership, which has contributed to fostering prosperity and creating growth and jobs on both sides of the Atlantic. I believe we should further expand this cooperation while simultaneously building stronger ties in the clean tech sector that will power the world's economy for the rest of the century. This could include a common transatlantic marketplace for clean technologies like solar, wind, critical raw materials, and small modular reactors. Ultimately, the best way to overcome the global challenges we face is by working together. Thank you.
Great. So Maroš, as you can see, I think is quite well aligned with the pragmatic view about what Melanie has just been discussing. But with that, I want to turn to our first very special guest, Senator Manchin, who has joined us for a few remarks. We talked earlier about the energy trilemma around energy security, energy equity, environmental sustainability, and I think it's fair to say that Senator Manchin does, and will continue to bring a strong focus on all three of these areas. We've always thought of him as one of the shrinking number of all of the above people in the Congress, and we welcome him here for some remarks on our global gas event. Joe, Senator Manchin.
Well, thank you, Ernie. It's great to be with you all this morning, and what better place to be than start looking at the future of energy and what we're going to need and what we're going to be lacking if we don't get our head out of our butts. You know, when you look at what we've done over the last 2 years, really, and the 117th Congress was a very, very monumental Congress that we got done, and we got it done because it was 50-50, an even split. So you figure for the first time in history of the United States of America, we had a absolute equal split in the Senate for the longest period of time. With that, we could have done nothing, or we could have decided to do something. Well, what we found out is basically the leadership couldn't lead without us. It needed every senator. One senator, one way or the other, could make a difference. So if you got like-minded people together, so we started immediately after the November election of 2020. 8 of us got together, 4 Ds and 4 Rs of the Senate, and thought we were going down this bipartisan path because we had control, and we used it. That's about as simple as that. And so everyone wants how this happened. Well, I can explain to you that the BBB was way overreaching from the standpoint of institutional changes that they wanted to make, especially in social reforms. And when I just couldn't get there, and I told the president. And I said, so you're changing, basically, you and I are the same vintage, but you're changing the mindset of America from John Kennedy asking not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for it, to how much more can my country do for me? I said, sir, I can't get there. I've tried. Now, out of that bill, we pulled out the bipartisan infrastructure bill. So we pulled the bipartisan infrastructure out of the BBB and retailored it, put about $100 billion of energy. Everybody was mad at me for quite some time for killing the BBB. I just couldn't get there, but I was honest with them. So people would say, why would you go back and do something like the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act? Well, it was basically energy again. If it wasn't for the Ukraine war, I'd have never done it. And when I saw Russia and Putin weaponized energy against the EU and what was going to happen, and I said, I remember the old song, "You're looking for love in all the wrong places." Our allies will be looking for energy in all the wrong places. And I knew we had to do something. So that was in March. I didn't want to make it public, so nobody knew we were writing a bill. We wrote the bill from March and got done in June. And the president's numbers were 20-some%. Gas was at $5 a gallon. Inflation was at 9.1%. They were determined, whatever, they'll take anything. And I kept saying, I told Schumer, he said, you got a bill? I said, I've got one. You're not going to like it. And I said, because your mindset is elimination. You think you can eliminate your way to a cleaner environment. I know you can't. I think you can innovate your way to a cleaner environment by technology and advancements in technology and sharing it with the rest of the world and helping all these, all the countries that are wanting to decarbonize and all the countries that just want energy. Show them how to do it and do it better. They accepted anything I would have put in front of them. So we put a piece of legislation called the Inflation Reduction Act, and inflation has gone down to about 3, staying in the 3.5% since then. Still too high for groceries, and energy is still high. But most things have stabilized. Our economy is the best economy in the world right now. And someone says, why isn't the president getting credit for it? I said, because he won't talk about it. Let me just tell you, the Inflation Reduction Act did 2 things specifically, 3 things really. It was designed for energy security, and I made that very clear to the president, Nancy Pelosi, and Chuck Schumer before we signed the bill. I said, you all know what this does? Yeah, we do. I said, well, we're producing more energy than ever before. This bill will produce more energy than we've ever done. So as of today, as of last year, the figures were 38 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. We've never done that. 4.7 billion barrels of crude oil. Never done that. We did 238 million megawatt hours of solar, never done that. And we installed 6.4 gigawatts of new batteries on the grid, never done that. So it did everything. It really truly is an all above energy, but they can't stand it. The administration is playing so far to the left and trying to appease the left that you never heard the word saying energy security. It's always about the greatest environmental bill. It truly is. But we're producing more too, so you should take credit. They can't. You never have ever heard that we paid 1/3 of that bill was paid in debt reduction. $230 billion off the top went right to debt reduction. You've never heard the administration or the president say one word about addressing our debt. And I says, I'm not signing a bill unless someone takes the debt serious in this country. Now, so we are where we are. Coal still produces 16% of our energy. Gas, 43% of our energy. Nuclear, 19%. Renewables, including hydro, is at 20%. And we're going to have more demand for energy than ever before. We've turned that curve already. So in the last 2 decades, we're doing more demand now than ever. And it's going to get greater. And they want to take things off. There's no new coal-fired plants being built. You can villainize coal all you want to. Someone ought to, that's like villainizing the veterans that go and fight in our war and put their lives on the line. The energy that's produced by coal, I mean, we should owe them a great debt of gratitude. My state is all coal, and we had coal miners that couldn't even go. They were deferred to go into the military in World War II and the Korean War just to stay there, produce energy. So when you look at that, and you want to know why things have changed and the politics have been upended, it's because people think they've been left behind. Someone asked me one time, what happened to the Democrats in West Virginia? And I says, they want to know what happened to the Democrats in Washington. I said, now all of a sudden the Democrats in West Virginia aren't good enough, clean enough, green enough, or smart enough. They said, the hell with you then. You don't like us, you don't want us, we'll change. We went from 80% being registered Democrats to 88% being registered Republicans in 1 decade. Never happened in the history of our country. One state, complete flipped in 1 decade. And that's what happens. When you take someone's job away and you don't have another opportunity to replace it with something as good, if not better, this is what will happen to you. So they're paying the price for that. With that, I start looking at the administration, what they're doing. But electricity, we start looking at where we are. The demand to hold steady or grown, driven by China and India, even if demand slows, US, EU, some forecast up to 60% growth by 2050. 2050. Both U.S. Energy Information, the EIA, and the International Energy, global natural gas demand is going to increase. No matter what happens, what scenario, it's going to increase. 10 to 20% of global electricity expected to be gas fuel by 2050. 10 to 20% gas fuel. 360 gigawatts of new natural gas power projects in Asia versus 25 gigawatts in Europe. And who knows where we're going to be here in the U.S., depending on how they apply some of the regulations to us. LNG is expected to become increasingly a large share. Right now we're at 14 billion cubic feet a day. We have 12 that's going to come online fairly quick, 2 or 3 years. We'll be at 26. There's 22 in the hopper. That means 48. Why? And I went over to the White House. Why are you all just keep shooting yourself in the foot? Why would you say we're going to put a pause before you've done the study? All we're asking for is a study. I want to know what to study. I want to know where the cap is. I'll be your best cheerleader. Just tell me where we should go. Is it 30 billion a day? Is it 50? Is it unlimited? I don't know. What's the reserve base here? Can you prove the reserve base? What basically is the future forecast of the desire or the need that we have for our economy in the United States? It's the only thing I can tell you. There's not a senator up there that will support pushing more LNG out if it's at the peril of the U.S. consumer and the economy of the U.S. If we're paying higher prices and being gouged because of higher profits being made overseas, that won't happen. But we want to know the facts. You're putting a pause before, so we want to pause the pause until we get the facts. That's about it. So these are the things I'm fighting on a day-to-day basis. Class 6 wells, okay, this is the greatest of all times. We put everything in there to make sure. Permitting was part of the IRA. Permitting fell out because of reconciliation and being the bird bath. We didn't have any finances we could put to that, so it fell out. But everyone promised, we're going to do it. Well, we did get the MVP, and you see what we went through to get. It took an act of Congress to get the Mountain Valley Pipeline. And first of all, people think we're just building a line because we want to build a line and push more product into the market that people don't want. You can't build a line unless there's a buyer. Nothing gets approved unless there's a market for it. And that's what happened. There's my partner in crime, Lisa Murkowski, and God bless her. But we've been fighting this battle for a long time, energy security, and making people understand. We have 2 energy states, Alaska and West Virginia, are big producers. And they're doing everything to shut the ANWR down, things that basically has been written into law forever, depending on the base, where we're going to get the energy that we need. So as we go through this, today we have only 2 Class 6 wells permitted for putting carbon capture, only 2. There's 128 pending, and there's just no information in sight that we're going to get this done in any timely fashion. Now they want to go ahead and put the fines in place on the methane fees, and I've told them, I said, guys, if it's not feasible, it's not reasonable. How in the world would you put a fine on someone when you won't let them go ahead and take care of the problem that you've determined needs to be done, methane, and then fine them for not doing it? I said, you're going to lose in court. Everything they're doing, they're going to lose in court. They're going to be sued and lose in court, and every one of them, but they could care less. Everything's on a real shot clock here for the election. And I've said this, I don't care what side of the fence you're on, right or left. If you're far to the right or far to the left, you're not going to sit on the sidelines. You're going to vote. They want to make you, now you'll make me believe you're going to sit on the sidelines and not go and vote and threaten the candidates running that you're not going to vote for them. Well, I can guarantee you the people on the left aren't going to vote for Donald Trump. They're just not going to do it. And they're advocates, so they're not going to sit on the sideline. Now, if they can buffalo you and make you hold up and do these crazy implementations, they'll do it. And the far right will do the same. T-Bar will do the same thing to the right. And it just gets to me, 60% of the people live in the center. 60% of us are center left, center right. We want the grand old party to be grand again. We want a Democrat party to be responsible again. That's all we want. Pretty common sense, pretty sensible. But they can't win without this, but they're basically weaponizing the political system to make you pick a side. What side are you on? You on D side or our side? I'm on the A side. I'm on the American side. Anybody on that side? That's the problem we've got. And they're using this as just as simple as can be. Gas has got to be in play. And gas is going to be in play for a long time, whether they like it or not. And we can do it better and cleaner. We have an 1,800 megawatt gas combined cycle in Doddridge County. It's going through the permitting process. Their big thing is getting on the grid, and we want to basically enhance the grid. We're all for that, but we're going to do that in a permitting process. Well, the far left believes, but by doing the grid, you're bringing all new renewables in. If you don't do the permitting process, you can't bring anything in. You're talking 7, 10, 12, 13 years. And when you look at what we just did as far as FRA, when we passed that and there was some NEPA reform, it put a 2-year maximum, but it should have been, a lot of the stuff could be done in 6 months, the review process. The administration, I put a statement out this morning, the administration just come out with new rules that basically they want to go clear up and take the maximum amount of 2 years. They don't want it done. This is what we're dealing with. And I keep telling them, I says, guys, I hate to do it, but I don't have a bit of problem speaking truth to power, because basically you're not looking at the long run of the American economy and the futures of America, what we can do. And we're going to be producing, like I say, 20% of the fuel that we're producing in gas right now is going to Europe. We're keeping Russian oil off. How can the administration basically allow Venezuela back into the market? How can they turn a blind eye to the ghost ships coming out of Iran just to put more product in the market, keep the prices down? Everything that we replace by producing in America helps the climate if we can keep dirtier fuels off the market. But they're not looking at that's not the short game that they want to play. The only thing I can say to all of this is that the United States is the leader right now. We have a leading economy. We're producing more energy than any other nation. We're doing everything that we should be doing if they'll just let the bills basically do what they're supposed to do. If they'll just implement the way the bills are written. But when you get a mindset of people that believe that no matter what we sign on to, no matter what we agree to, we can still change it through the rules. I'll tell you the gimmick they use, and the best gimmick of all, temporary rules. Temporary rule keeps us out of the courtroom, okay? Not until there's permanent. And with temporary rules, now they have temporary rules on a lot of the things I just talked about through 2026 and beyond because of that. But we're going to sue anyway. If any of you have been damaged by any of the crazy stuff going on, come see me and my committee. We will write the amicus brief and you'll win every time. because we can show how the bill was written, what the intent of the bill was, and why they're subverting the intent. And I've told the president this, what I'm telling you, so it's no news to, this isn't anyone wants to write about it, you can do what you want. He and I have sat there and talked. I said, you got your staff, you got a radical climate staff that's leading you down the primrose path. And if you don't change it, you're going to lose. Because people want to know the good things that happen in the future. They want to make sure they're going to have dependable, reliable, affordable energy. That's all. That's all we've ever wanted. And if we can do it better and cleaner anywhere in the world, why not? Take credit for it. And they haven't been able to, because you have to acknowledge we are producing more fossil, better and cleaner. Well, that's not good enough for the far left. And then we're also producing more renewables. That's not good enough for the far right. So you got yourself an oxymoron right here, caught between two. That's what we're trying to alleviate if we can. You all can do that by putting the facts. And Ernie's been the best at this, telling exactly what the facts are. He and I have had agreements, and we've had agreements to disagree, and we've worked through every one of them and came down as long as we looked at the facts. You know, the facts will set you free, like the truth will set you free, because they are what they are. You can't make wrong right, and you can't change the facts to basically towards your thought process. So with that, Ernie, I appreciate being here. If you have any questions at all, I'm happy to answer them, or talk about anything you all want to, or let Lisa come up here and she'll finish it off in grand fashion.
Terrific.
Do you have anything?
Let's have Lisa make the launch. I don't know if you can stay.
Yeah, I'll say, you come, let me introduce to you. I want to tell you this. And then really, I mean, and you don't always see this with Democrats and Republicans. Forget about Democrats. Her and I'm not a Washington Democrat, and she is sure as hell not a Washington Republican, okay? And we feel that basically, what can we do for our country? So we're always two of us every time working together. Does that make sense? Nah. Can we work this out? Let's try this. And we always have a group working. You don't see that. You don't hear much about it. But there's the good people up there that want to do the right thing. And this is one of the best partners I've ever had in my legislative experiences when I was in West Virginia legislature, and then coming here to have someone that was always looking for an answer, not looking for a problem. And that makes the world of difference in getting things done. I introduced you my dear friend, my colleague from Alaska, Lisa Murkowski.
I can add to the introduction. I'll just let you go. No. Okay.
You don't have to introduce.
All right, I'll just add, first of all, I forgot to say, of course, Senator Manchin, as you all know, is chair of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. Lisa Murkowski, Senator Murkowski, of course, is a senior member and has been the chair. I would just note that she carried on the family tradition of confirming me into various positions in the government. But again, we heard from Senator Manchin about the focus on that trilemma, security, equity, environment. The same statement applies to Senator Murkowski, common sense approaches across the board in balancing these priorities. Please, Senator Murkowski.
Ernie, thank you. And I love coming in and listening to my friend Joe Manchin. I do have a bone to pick with my friend Joe Manchin because he won't run for president. We need somebody who will talk common sense to the American people about some of these issues. And again, you can talk your politics, but our reality when it comes to the energy space is we have been divorced from reality with some of the policies that unfortunately we have seen. And that makes it hard. It makes it hard to understand. It makes it hard to understand. It makes it hard to explain to people what is going on in a country that is so blessed with these resources. And you talk to folks who do not have that same level of blessing, and they cannot figure out why we would deny these economic opportunities, this resource, this energy security, why we would deny that to the American public. And it's a question that deserves repeating and repeating. So, Ernie, I should say Secretary Moniz, but Ernie, thank you for your leadership. Melanie, thank you for what you do, the whole EFI team. I think your focus is really just on this. It's the common sense approach. It is a clear-eyed view to the problems, but also a clear-eyed view to the solutions that we have. Because we don't need to dream them up. We have them. We just need to implement them into policy. And then we need to be able to talk about them rationally. For some reason, we've gotten to a point where we can't talk about energy in a bipartisan space. How did it get to be that way? And I will suggest to you, it got to be that way here in Washington, D.C., but in most parts of the country, it's not necessarily a Republican thing to believe that we need more oil and gas, or a Democrat thing to believe that we need more renewables. I'm going to take my state as a very specific example. We have to have it all. The all of the above energy policy is not just a nice, catchy slogan. It has to be in play in a state like mine that's 1/5 the size of the country. And yes, we have oil that helps fill our revenues to provide for things like public safety and roads and education and the like. But the fact of the matter is we're not even refining much of our product. We send it all outside, and then we pay extra to get it back. It's not a very smart policy, but it's what has been in place now for close to 50 years. So we've got the resource, but how do we allow the residents of a place like Alaska to be able to access it? We got to figure out what the other things are. And so we've been pioneering, imagineering, as our good friend Bernie Carl would say, we've been imagineering what microgrids actually look like, because that's what we put in place. And it's a little bit of solar, it's a little bit of wind, it's a little bit of run of river, it's whatever it is that you have where you are. And so you ask those people out there, is this a Republican Party policy or a Democrat policy? They're like, I don't care. I'm just looking for something to get me off diesel-powered generation so that I'm not paying 45 cents a kilowatt hour. So there's a practical approach that we have lost here in Washington, D.C., and that's why we have to have dialogue that is based around the facts and that then helps drive the policy making. So today is my son's birthday. So therein is the reason that I'm a few minutes late, because he rolled into Washington, D.C. last night, and I'm having my cup of coffee, giving him a kiss and saying, have a beautiful birthday. I'm running off to talk about the future of natural gas in a low-carbon world. And he looks at me, and he worked at the FERC a few years back, and he's like, so what's to talk about? He said, of course we have a future with natural gas. If we didn't, where would we be? Now, I'm not saying that my son is super smart, but I think he's paid attention to what I've been talking about, so it makes me really validated. But it does acknowledge, again, what we're seeing in other parts of the country. Now, it may be that here in the United States, we're not seeing our natural gas demand rise that much. But certainly in Europe, it's relatively moderate, fairly moderate, according to your report. But it's Asia. It's Asian. It's not just China. And so we're looking at that. We're looking at that very, very closely. We recognize that every region's needs are different. But how are we going to plan for all of this? How are we going to be in a position to be responsive? Whether it's the ability to be more nimble, as we were when Russia invades Ukraine and all of a sudden Europe needs to find other partners. We were able to be nimble. We were able to respond. We were able to lead in a way that made sense. But think about where we would have been if we didn't have that flexibility, if we didn't have that nimbleness. And it's not where we would be, where Europe would be. So what are we doing to anticipate this demand from Asia? And again, this is where Alaska can play a huge role because of where we're sitting. We don't share our oil or our gas, for the most part, with the United States. Our oil we'd send down to California to refine. They don't like that. But our reality is Asia. These are our trading partners. And it's not just Japan and South Korea. It's the potential for Vietnam, for Taiwan, for the Philippines, for India, for Thailand. And so how we are positioning ourselves for that is going to be key going forward. We've got the resource. We want to produce it. We're geographically proximate to Asia. We don't have to transit any canals. We're pretty good that way. And bottom line is we should all prefer Alaska's supply to what you're going to see from Russia, from Iran, and elsewhere. Final point that I want to make in thanking you for the work that EFI has done and your team is this focus on food security and industrial process. We have got to be talking about that more. I don't think that they're getting the attention that they deserve. We talk about the national security, we talk about the economic security, but food security, man, oh man, we better start paying attention to it, as well as what's going on within the industrial place. And I said that was the last point, but I'm going to add one more because I can. There's some recommendations in this report that I think are particularly relevant, and adding an energy security determination for LNG export permit decisions, I think that would help focus and improve federal decisions. So I think that's something you can look at and you can say there's a specific recommendation that should and could be implemented. So thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for the kind of the clear-eyed view of what is in front of us, what our opportunities are, and how we're going to work to take full advantage of them. So thanks for the opportunity to be here with you this morning. And remember, just pragmatic energy policies, that's all we need. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
I think I'm going to call an audible on the. Thank you, Senators Manchin and Murkowski. And I might just add, given your last point, Senator Murkowski, on the adding energy security to the public interest determination on LNG exports, just to note that actually going back to 2014, after Russia's initial incursion into Ukraine, the G7 plus the EU, we noted really at the very top of the discussion that energy security we have to view as a collective responsibility among our allies and friends. That means that using that in the public interest determination does break a little new ground, but I think it's ground we need to break because it implies so much for our overall security that thank you for pulling that out, because it is a pretty significant, I think, recommendation. Well, thank you, Senators Manchin, Murkowski. Again, it's amazing how we kept hearing over and over again the words of security and equity and environment, pragmatism, all of the above, and that's the way we approach this. And thank you so much for your support. Thank you. Yes. We also heard the words common sense repeated, I think. We are running into the witching hour for this room, and we have an outstanding panel waiting for a virtual discussion led by David Ellis. Given the time, I'm going to have to call an audible and make a real-time recommendation that we have our panelists record some video remarks that we will post on our website, and ask you all to look at the website to hear what they have to say. For example, we heard from Maroš Šefčovič in terms of a European perspective. One of our panelists specifically was there for the Asian perspective, which is so important. So we apologize to our panelists for that, but hopefully we can convince you, and we'll get back to you to do a little recording that we can put your central remarks on our website. So finally, I go back and first of all, thank again Melanie and the team, Melanie for her presentation, but Melanie and the team for all this work they've done over the last couple of years on the global gas study, and a little additional hand for that. And thank you all again for coming. But I would be remiss if not making one announcement that you all pretty much already know about, namely that we say it as a bittersweet moment that Melanie will be, this will be her last, I think, major public appearance at EFI, because she was yesterday named by the governor of New Mexico as the next New Mexico Secretary of Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources, for which we congratulate her. What we don't congratulate her on is that she starts the job on Wednesday of next week after finishing with us this week. But anyway, as you all know, she and I and Joe Heiser here formed EFI back in 2017. I think we all brought very complementary approaches, skills, sometimes excitement to the task. And as you all know, 3 legs is a stable stool. We're going to try to figure out how to keep the 2-legged stool up. But and again, we all thank you, Melanie, for not just obviously for this gas study, but for all you've done in the last 7 years, really. Not to mention the what was it, 80 or so years before that? No, I forget. Yeah, not quite that. But anyway, actually, Melanie and I have worked together almost continuously for 27 years, and so it's a big change for everyone. But I think Melanie will bring in addition to the skill sets that you all know about, bring a can-do spirit, I think, to really get things done in New Mexico, and hopefully that will include implementing many of the recommendations that EFI has made over these years. So thank you, Melanie. Again, thank you all, and please do check our website in a little while to get the inputs from our panel members. Thank you. I think we had no choice.